You're listening to the New Story podcast from New Story Church in Kansas City. To learn more about New Story Church, visit our website at www.newstory.church.
Welcome, everybody, to the Equip Podcast, equipping you to live out your Christian life as you faithfully love God and love others with truth and grace. My name's Jeremy, one of the pastors here at New Story Church, and privileged to be sitting here with one of our other pastors, Mr. Pierce Gibson.
Hi, Jeremy.
Well, hello, Pierce. I've been enjoying recording these in my office rather than up in the studio. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
But we should go back up to the studio. It's been a minute. She's feeling lonely up there.
She's a room.
It
is a room.
It is a room. I guess the
it has no soul.
Studio is
it has no feelings.
Has a gender. Yeah, glad you're here. Glad we're able to talk. As we continue talking through our series Reframing, we're going to get into some of that because you gave a talk on Sunday on something that historically you have not cared about very much.
No, not at all.
That being politics, and no surprise that is something we're going to talk about on this episode. And before you're like, ugh, more stuff, just stick with us. I think it's important, and I'm not just saying that because, obviously we're not going to sit here and tell you who to vote for. We're not going to tell you who to not vote for. But we're just going to kind of give you hopefully some practical wisdom and just talk through this a little bit more. Maybe some parts of this we don't think about often. Most of the time we just think about the impact on us, and we're just going to encourage you to broaden your horizons a little bit, ask some important questions. So we'll get there in just a moment, but y'all know how we have to start this thing. We have no guest today, but other guests today besides just me and Pierce on here. We got to start it with Riddles with Pierce. So today is a little bit more traditional.
All right, traditional. Okay.
Traditional of a riddle.
Okay.
This one may be easy, it may not be. It may be one you've heard before.
All right.
But I do. By the way, one of my favorite scenes in The Office is when Dwight is trying to. It's one of their cold opens. Dwight is trying to catch Ryan with a. You know what I'm talking about? You've not watched The Office, have you?
Oh, I've seen The Office like 7 times.
You're looking at me like you didn't know.
I was waiting.
Dwight was trying to get Ryan with a riddle, and so he starts the riddle, and Ryan already tells him the answer. And then he throws another one, and it's super funny because he knows all the answer to him. But this one you may have heard before, you may not. Okay. What occurs once in a minute, twice in a moment, and never in 1,000 years?
All right. So what happens?
Once in a minute.
Once a minute. Twice.
In a moment.
And
never in 1,000 years.
And never in 1,000 years. All right. Once in a minute. So in 60 seconds.
Uh-huh.
It happens once. It happens twice in a moment. Twice.
Just a snap.
It's a moment. And then never for 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is there? So, okay, dude.
Riddle. It's never what you think it is.
It's never what I think it is. So, it's not gonna have to do with the clock. Or does it?
I'm shrugging my shoulders not to give him any advice.
So it happens.
I mean, you can't say it's on a clock. It's a moment. Moment's not a measure of time.
Well, listen. Okay. All right, so it happens once a minute. So if you have 60 seconds and you count from 1 to 60, it happens once.
Mm-hmm.
It happens twice every moment, or in a moment, or whatever you said. Twice.
Twice in a moment.
Twice in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Never in 1,000 years. My brain went to syllables.
Oh, syllables, yeah. That's not a bad idea.
I don't think that was the hint though.
No.
Okay, I don't even know how to begin thinking through this. So, once a minute, twice in a moment.
Imagine you're looking at the words in front of you. Ripping a tag off your head in the process.
So let me tap out once in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Once
have to visualize the words. Once in a minute, twice in a moment, never in 1,000 years.
Never. Oh, is it the letter M?
It is the letter M.
Yeah, I've never got that. Yeah, because there's a 1 in minute,
Yep.
twice, 2 in moment, and then none.
It is the letter M. Congratulations, Pierce Gibson. You got the riddle. Or did you just Google it and cheat?
I didn't.
Turn your computer around right now.
Listen, it was text messages. I'm looking at a picture of a corn stalk.
Okay, that's not helpful at all.
No, because I was trying to type out minute, and then I was like, oh, it's minute, moment,
Yep.
1,000 years.
You got it. And that will conclude our segment of riddles with Pierce.
Okay.
Good job.
Thanks.
You deducted. The hard thing with all those riddles is you always try to think the most obvious, and then you have to not think the most obvious. Like, what could it possibly be going after?
Here,
So,
think really hard about what it could, like it has to be, and then think
Ignore
really
that.
hard about what it cannot be.
because it's gonna be that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so obviously tomorrow is actually I want to before we do that. Sunday we had something kind of cool happen. We got a couple Connect cards from people. Do you mind sharing you don't have to give names or anything, but kind of what really cool news from those?
Yeah, we had a couple people say they wanted to renew their walk with the Lord,
Mhm.
and another person who wanted to learn more what it looks like to begin a life with Jesus, and like wanting to more resource about what it looks like to grow. And so they said they marked as first time guests, and so in a talk on politics, who would have thought, that we're scaring them to Jesus, No, just kidding.
Opposite of what we're trying to do.
Opposite what we're trying to do. But yeah, it's just kind of cool that, just as a good reminder that the Lord uses all things. And, we work really hard at our church to try to be warm and welcoming, inviting and love people well. And so just, so I haven't got a chance to reach out and talk to any of them yet, but you don't plan to do that.
I mean,
And,
it's Monday.
It's Monday. So, yeah, it'd be just kind of cool to see
Yeah.
some things behind the scenes happening
Mhm.
in people's hearts. And that's our prayer, is
Yeah.
that we don't know how God is working and how God is leading, but we
Mhm.
want to be faithful with the people we do have.
Yeah, and multiple people are taking steps in getting involved and serving in different areas. I have one person's going to be coming on Serve Tour this weekend with me to go see what areas around the church to serve in and where they can get plugged in. It's just neat to see people taking next steps.
Mm-hmm.
It's encouraging.
sure.
So just want to encourage you guys with that as you listen, and you may not always see the stuff behind the scenes. That's really, really cool to watch. And we had last weekend, we had our trunk or treat, and we had hundreds of people from our community come through.
Yeah, Jen said we had 10,000 pieces of candy and we ran out.
That's nuts.
Yeah, that's crazy.
10,000 pieces of candy.
Yeah, and then I bought like another 1,000.
Jeez. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts.
That's nuts. No nuts, actually, because those are an alert.
You're right.
You have allergies.
Forgive me.
Yeah. But it's really cool. Good opportunities to connect with people in our community. A lot of familiar faces that we see regularly throughout the year, and hope, or at events like this, and hopefully we see them come and begin to follow Jesus. It's always our hope with those. So, yeah, a lot of cool things happening right now. Giving trees kicking off, Thanksgiving meals kicking off. I'm just trying to think of all the different things happening right now. There's a lot.
There's a lot on our
a
list
lot of
right
good,
now. A lot of good things
being done around New Story. Now, shifting gears a little bit. Tomorrow is Election Day in the United States of America. It is the presidential election, the 47th presidential election, and Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, and we'll see what happens. And there's obviously third-party libertarian candidates, things like that, that you can vote for as well, or you can write in Jesus Christ, whatever you're feeling. You can do that. There were, I think, last 4 years ago, there was, or maybe it was midterms. There's people that wrote in anyone else. There was a lot of
People who wrote anyone else.
Yeah. That's funny.
Which is probably how a lot of people feel.
Yes.
Like all reality.
Yeah. But yesterday we thought in scheduling out this series, reframing. Well, we earlier in the year, jump back a little bit earlier in the year. I taught a series in April on Jesus, the Church, and Politics. We talked about that on here. You can go back, listen to those episodes, listen to those messages, obviously. But we thought leading up to Election Day would
before we get into the thick of election season, and that's what we wanted to do. So way before,
in April.
Yeah, back in April. Yeah, way before we want to like, hey, let's just get these things out in front. So that way when it starts happening, because inevitably it did start happening.
Before any assassination attempt, before Biden dropping out, before any of that stuff, we talked about it. To hopefully help us even then, before the series reframing came into place. Jesus, the Church, and Politics was there to help us reframe our politics. And so we talked about that yesterday. And Pierce took us through that. And so in your kind of study, I guess what's been helpful for you, or what's stuck out to you through your studying this? Because I know, like we've talked about a few times, and you've been honest about, this isn't a thing you like talking about. This isn't the thing you're passionate about. This isn't a thing you just kind of want to keep it way out there.
Yeah, some people, like I saw, the donkey, the elephant, we're going to be with the lamb, so I've seen that a few times. And
we don't follow donkey or an elephant. We follow the lamb.
Yeah, we follow the lamb. And I would describe myself probably as a giraffe or an ostrich. I'm either, my head is way above everybody. And so politics is beneath me, or I've been burying my head in the sand, that I don't really care about it. So I just avoid it. And so that's been my past, and it's been my reality for a long time when it comes to politics. So even in my studies and praying and just kind of working through this, it's like, okay, well then it's like, what in the reality is, I can't change people's minds when it comes to and I'm not going to tell someone this is how they ought to vote. I'm not going to force people's hands into this, but with the voice I have in the election, even for my own sake, what I was thinking, what do I want for me in the election? What do I want, for to be known of me when it comes to politics? I don't want to be known as the person that is insufferable, or who people don't want to be around because of my views on politics, or that I rub people the wrong way because I'm so staunchly supportive of one side or not, which I don't want that. But what I do want to know is that I want to be Christ-like and loving and caring, and that in my civic responsibility to vote, I think Christians should engage in the process. I think as our responsibility to our neighbor, as a responsibility and a right that we have of the country we live in, I think we should engage. And so in this,
but before you keep going, that idea of I want to be, you talked about yesterday that what Paul said to the Philippians of basically what's said of us, that we are reasonable.
Yeah, which I haven't seen that translated that way, but because most Bibles will say gentle, but when we hear the word gentle, what do we think? We think soft. Yeah. We think passive. We think, which there's an element.
Jesus was gentle, and he wouldn't necessarily like that.
Yeah, and so it's we hear that, but it's the word really is, because it's in the midst of a conflict, and the word is used to be reasonable, to be wise, to be gracious in disputes. Yeah. And so that was what the nature that I hadn't seen before when I was getting to this study, because I was like, what do I want, not just for myself? What do I want for my family? What do I want for our church? Is in our disagreements, in our disputes, when we leave the church building, and we go and we talk to others. Yeah, I want us to be known as reasonable people, and that hasn't always been the case when it has come to Christians. Yeah.
One thing that you, one thing that you said, you quoted Andy Stanley from his book.
In it to Win It. Not In It to Win It.
Definitely not Into It. Minute to Win It. Not In It to Win It by Andy Stanley. He said disagreement is unavoidable, or disagreement is inevitable, but division is a choice. Yeah. And then you followed it up that Christians should be known for being reasonable, wise people, can handle disagreements with maturity. so much of the time, it feels like discussions around politics, there just needs to be a stinking adult in the room, because adults are acting like children. And Christians
and
should
then the
be
children
the adult
think
in the
they're
room.
adults, you know?
Yeah. And Christians should be the adult in the room when it comes to this.
Yeah, and we get into these talks, and this is, again, I try not to engage in a lot of conversations with it, just because it sometimes it rubs me the wrong way, but like, we've all been in a room with somebody when that's the nature of every single conversation it goes to. Every conversation turns to a political talk, and you can't see what I'm doing, but every time that starts happening, I just start sinking in my chair, and I want to just slide out of the room, just because what everyone knows about politics is divisive.
Yeah.
And it divides so easily.
Yeah, I mean, the trope is you don't talk about it at Thanksgiving.
Someone told me that there's two things you don't talk about: money and politics, and you'll get along with anybody.
Religion and politics. Well,
Yeah,
religion, money, and politics.
Religion, money, and politics.
Avoid those.
Yeah, avoid those, and you'll be fine. But then it's like, well, as Christians, what are we called to do? Preach the kingdom. And it's like, we're talking about the idol.
Which kingdom are we preaching?
Which kingdom we're talking about?
Yeah.
And this is idol of money. Is this idol of politics, or is what's on the throne of the hearts?
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things you said back in the April series is that our heart reveals where our allegiance lies, and that's where I got that when I said that yesterday.
Yeah. There's in the same line, you said actions partially show what we believe, but our reactions always will.
Yeah,
and it's in the same vein. Like we can act for a bit, but how we react to situations truly reveals our hearts and what's in our hearts more than anything else. Something Andy Stanley said also that in that book that was fantastic was that 2020, what happened in 2020, revealed who we are and whose we are. And for a lot of us, it's very damning evidence of whose we really are.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And our reactions this time around can do the same thing. We can tell a different story this time around. We have to choose that. In fact, I as you were talking, it reminded me of a hymn I sang it when I was a kid, called "Let It Be Said of Us."
I don't know that one.
Okay.
No, let me hear it.
Dude, I'll sing it. No, I won't. Let it be said of... I could do it. I won't. It said, "Let it be said of us that the Lord was our passion." Speaking of Christians singing this, "Let it be said of us that the Lord was our passion, that with gladness we bore every cross we were given, that we fought the good fight, that we finished our course, knowing within us the power of the risen Lord. Let the cross be our glory and the Lord be our song, by mercy made holy, by the Spirit made strong." And the chorus goes on. "Let the cross be our glory and the Lord be our song, till the likeness of Jesus be through us made known." And just kind of repeats that refrain. And the second verse this is good too. I was just looking through. In Baptist hymns, there's like orphaned verses. I was like, everybody on the third. Oh, did we just skip in the second? Or like,
if you ain't first, you're last.
Yeah, apparently. Where's it? Okay.
We'll edit this out in post.
Oh yeah, let it be said of us, we were marked by forgiveness, we were known by our love, and delighted in meekness, and we were ruled by His peace, heeding unity's call, joined as one body, that Christ would be seen by all.
That's just Philippians 4.
Dude, it's freaking good.
And it's one thing to know what to believe. And to have belief, but it's another thing to actually put that into practice. And that's James 1, be doers of the word, not just hearers. Matthew 7, the passage we've been in. And even that first verse there, I was thinking, I quoted Acts 20:24, and I said right before, it's like, I carry the burden and responsibility, like everyone in the room, if they're a Christ follower, to make disciples in our cultural historic moment. Like, regardless of who you are, when it comes to your Christ, you have a mission. in Acts 20, it says, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord has given me, the task of testifying to the good news of God's grace.
Yeah.
And it's like, that hymn is cool, man. That's if you
Yeah.
want a case for some hymns, there we go.
Yeah. And I bring that up. We bring all this up because this is what I hope can be said of Christians. Let it be said of us after this, that the kingdom is our first priority. And so, like I said in our last episode with Ashley, I said, be careful how you celebrate or sulk this year. The results of this election. Be careful how you celebrate, because it will show people where your priority lies.
Yeah, one of the things I said is
Your allegiance lies.
Come Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning, people are going to say the
Thursday,
election was rigged,
Yeah.
and or it was one fair and square.
Mm-hmm.
And depending,
It won't say that.
well,
Something will be wrong.
Yeah,
That's
something
usually
will
how it
be
goes.
wrong. It'll be rigged, or and then in response to that, they'll say, no, we want it fair and square.
Mhm.
So there's gonna be immediate
I see what
argument
you're
about. Yeah, that's what I was saying. And for us as believers is, are we gonna
Mhm.
join in? Are we gonna
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah.
Are we gonna further that narrative? Because that's
Mhm.
not what being reasonable is.
Yeah.
And that's not being. Because I even gave a definition that, like, when I was working through it, is reasonable means to be fair,
Mm-hmm.
to be equitable, to be impartial in your thinking, to not give into extreme opinions, not
Mhm.
carried away by passions, honorable in your speech, and not reactionary. And that's when Paul is bringing this up in the midst of a dispute in their church, and for gospel priority, he's saying, this is what you have to be.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be these when dealing with one another, dealing with brothers and sisters. And that's part of it too, that I think is really hard to see for me and you as pastors, is the world is hard enough as it is to live faithfully for an ever-changing God and an ever-changing world. And you know what makes it harder most often for Christians? Other Christians.
Yeah.
Because we're the first ones to call out one another.
Yep. You're not standing hard enough on this thing. You're taking too hard of a stance on this thing. If I endorsed a candidate, some people would be like, praise God. And some people would be like, you're going too hard. Like, that's inappropriate for you to do that.
It's abuse of your power.
Yeah. It's spiritual abuse for you to do something like that. And it's like, it's spiritual abuse for you not to endorse it. It's nonsense, man.
Yeah, and me and you are both fairly careful when it comes to, like, political talks. Like, again, because we recognize our power and our influence we have, and so we don't want to use that, lightly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not going to be like sharing things that's going to say, hey, this is who I'm voting for, or anything like that. Not because we don't believe in what we're doing. It's just that we know there's just a lot of eyes looking at us when it comes to in our scheme of things.
Yeah.
People look to us in those, and so we don't want to create division and say, well, Jeremy said this or Pierce said this. Yeah. But what we want to call people to is how do we become more and better followers of Jesus in our politics and how we engage in politics. Yeah. And again, I'm not telling I am, as much as I hate it, politics and talking about it, I think Christians should engage in the process, because
100%.
I don't think we can just sit on our hands. But part of us bettering our communities is how we're going to bridge the gap to affect change in this. And part of the way we can do that is vote. But I think the primary thing, I think Josh Van Zyl, we were hanging out with the three of us one time, and he said, I remember him talking, he said, if we think we just get the right candidate in office, everything's going to fall in place. But very rarely do people know what are actually going on in their local elections. Yeah. And he said, that's actually where you can see more difference. That's like you go look across the street and you can see a change, and you can actually be tangible at that. But I think I can't remember if he said it, but we get the idea. It's because very often we vote and then we just sit on our hands and saying, I did it. I'm going to shake my hands clean. They got it now. I did my part. Yeah. And it's like, that's not what we're advocating for at all. It's like when we do our vote, it's like, now it's time to get going.
Yeah. That's a start line. That's a finish line.
Yeah.
the election day.
And the reality
Yeah.
is every 4 years it happens again. And so there's not a finish date until Christ comes
Yeah.
back. It's like
Yeah.
we're all constantly. And so if your party wins or your party doesn't, you're still called to better those around you. And that's one aspect of neighboring that I think is important, especially with politics. The big thing we hear is economics and economy, how good it's been in previous and how bad it is now, and how bad it will be or how good it will be.
Yeah.
But regardless of the situation or outcome, even in now, if this as bad it is, again, fairly bad, not great. It's been better.
Mm-hmm.
How are we using our resources now to affect change?
Yeah.
What does our giving look like to not just the church, but to other organizations that are seeking change in society?
Yeah.
Who are bettering the neighbors, who are feeding the orphans or feeding the homeless.
Yeah.
Are we just waiting for prosperity to come in this golden age, for us to finally start doing that? But I think Jesus even says, he's like, those who are trusted with a little will be trusted with more.
Yeah.
And it's like being good stewards of the gifts you have now. And it's like, regardless if it's a bad economy or good economy, I'm still called to use it for his good and his glory.
Yeah. And these, I think it can be really easy for us to sit here and be like, oh, just don't act a fool. But like there's some very important things on the ballot. There's some very important things that are being voted on. And if you look at the platforms of different candidates, there's very important things that they stand for or don't stand for. And so there's some real implications to this. So I don't want to sit here and pretend to be unaware that there is economic, personal, societal implications to who gets into office, implications for people that aren't even citizens of this country yet. Like there's implications to our neighbors and our kids and all these different things. So these things matter. I guess what we're trying to push for more than anything is that you can't contend for Christian values. And I said this in April. You can't contend for Christian values by ignoring Christian values. You can't contend. You can't ignore the fruit of the Spirit that says to be kind and gentle and humble and self-controlled while standing against racial injustice or standing for the unborn. We can't ignore the calls that are on our lives, the importance of self-control and being measured in our responses while we contend for these things. We can't ignore Christian values while trying to contend for Christian values. That's incongruent. And it makes us look unreasonable. It makes us look stupid. It makes us look like this kingdom is all of there is. And if we can't debate, I wrote it down somewhere. I can't find it now. But if we can't disagree without disrespect, then we don't debate. Like we don't engage ourselves. If we can't, disagree or engage in this without just disrespecting people. Like I think the thing that gets me the most. Now I'm just off on a tangent here. The thing that gets me the most is people using names for people and candidates and other leaders that are intentionally to dehumanize and make them look stupid or make them look like a terrible person or to make fun of them. Whether it's nicknames for Kamala, whether it's nicknames for Trump, whether it's nicknames for any one of these candidates, I think it is dehumanizing. It's inhumane for us to do that. What we are doing in that moment is we are following, as you talked about, following the pattern of this world. And we are not following ethics of the kingdom. We are allowing the world to influence the words that we say. We are allowing the world to tell us what we should be calling these people because we are so partisan and so freaking internet-brained or news-brained that we can't see beyond, I got to make this person look stupid. And that makes us look ridiculous. It shows the sinfulness of our hearts. And that bothers me so stinking much that we can't see outside of ourselves enough and outside of our partisan position.
And one thing
to show humanity to the other side. Yeah,
showing humanity. And even when you're talking about debating and debating rightly, like we like to think we can do that. No, I want to hear you out. I want to hear your side. I can debate and not be biased. I'm unbiased, and that's like the thing that comes out, and especially in debates and politics, is that's what you see, because a lot of people do think, oh, I can navigate this. I can handle it myself. I'm not going to have bad body language when it comes to someone I disagree with, but
most of the time we listen to respond, to not listen to understand, though.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
We're just building our case as they're talking and not really paying attention to trying to understand them as
like
a person
we're doing in a podcast.
Position.
We're trying to work through what we're listening to one another, and we're trying to build off. But that's what we do.
Hey, we should do talk on communication soon.
I think we're going to.
Hey, look at that.
I'm still praying about it, but I'm pretty sure that's what we're doing.
Okay, all right.
I think that's what we'll be doing. We're talking about communication.
This weekend?
Probably.
All right, we're putting it down. We're locking it in.
Communication,
that's our pick for this weekend.
Okay. I think we need to do it. Mm-hmm. But, and I was one passage I didn't read, but it was in our small group, is 1 John. He's really talking about the fruit of the fellowship, that there's people that have left the congregation and basically denying Jesus Christ as the Lord. But one of the verses that I think is very interesting is in chapter 3. It says, the one that does what is right is righteous, just as he is righteous. And then it will say, this is how God's children and the devil's children become obvious. Who does not do what is right is not of God. And if you look at Jesus' words, you look at Paul's words, hearing and putting into practice matters.
Sounds like James.
Sounds like James too. Add him in there. And it's so much so is like, one of the things I said at the very end is the kingdom is characterized by public belief, not private, or public actions, not private belief.
Yeah. And
it's not that you get saved because of your actions. It's about that the fruit within you that then is out, that people can see. And it's like, this is how it becomes obvious.
Yeah.
And the fruit, the question that we could have is, what the fruit are people seeing?
Yeah.
What is obvious about you when it comes to politics and elections? Are you someone you can talk with?
Yeah.
Or are you someone people avoid when it comes to that?
We've gotten so good at going through the motions and acting. Just in general, we do that. It's not exclusive to Christians. We can do this like group to group to group as we just kind of like mold and adapt, and so we'll act one way here and act another way there. And we do note, it shouldn't surprise us that we now take that into the church and we do the exact same thing, where we can be really appear very devout in our actions, but extremely heretical in our hearts. Because what is actually what we truly believe is we know this, and we'll stand for this, that we're not saved by actions, we are saved by grace through faith. It is not of us. Ephesians 2. We know that, and then we seem to forget it when it actually comes to be put into practice. One question I thought I won't get off on that, because I think were you going to continue there? No,
you go, you pick up. I had another thought. I wanted to see if I want to flesh it out real quick. So you go.
Okay. Another thing you wrote, or you wrote down, I wrote down what you said. There's a really good question to ask, and it was toward the end, and I was sitting out in the foyer, and I'm like, ooh, that's a really good one for us to consider. And I think it's multifaceted, and you just don't have time to get into it all on a Sunday morning. But who has disappeared from your life because of politics? And there's a couple different sides to that. One, who's disappeared from your life because you're a butt?
Yeah.
Because you had to make sure to put a bunch of signs out in your front yard and fly your flag. And you had to post all those things, and you had to call people out in the comments. You had to do all that different stuff. Who has left your life because of that? And then the other side is, who has left your life because that was their choice? Not because you were a jerk, because you were kind in your stance, but your stance was the way of Jesus, and they did not want Jesus. Not that they didn't want you; they didn't want Jesus.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I was more the first one.
Yeah.
That's definitely because of the tone of it.
Sure.
But that is, again, the reality when it comes to walking with Jesus, trying to live in the way of Jesus, in the heart of Jesus. Sometimes, and Jesus said this, you will be hated.
Yeah. It should break our hearts.
And that sucks. When you're trying to live faithfully for an ever-changing God and ever-changing world, you're trying to do things the right way. You're trying to be kind, you're trying to be gracious, you're trying to be loving, you're trying to serve your neighbor faithfully and well, but then they know you're a Christian.
And if they don't want that, that's not on you.
Yeah, it's on them.
If they don't want Jesus, that's what should be said of us. Not that they didn't want us, that they didn't want Jesus. We want that to be their choice. We don't want them to not want Jesus. I mean, first of all, just to clarify on that.
We want them to know
But we
Jesus.
don't want to be so in the way that they're like, I don't want Jesus because of them. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Dang it, I wrote down something else here. Oh, what happens more often than not, and this is what, we see go on the internet and talk with people, is that Christians, when people do separate or people do go away, or if they're on the opposite side, we just say they're demonic. And I think we talked about this the other day. We say, oh, they're just acting demonic. Whether you want to call them the demonicrats or whatever you want to say, we just say those people are demonic. When we say things like that, and that's a very common trope that we say about people on the other side of things, are we saying, we're saying one of two things. We're either saying that they have been, that they're influenced by demons, or we're saying they're actual demons. They're not actual demons. So what we're saying is they're influenced by demons, and that should break our hearts. And it shouldn't be a flag that we fly and be like, oh, these demons, we're going after them. These guys are influenced by demons. Like, whatever.
They're
demonic.
down the doors of Hades,
We should be broken by that.
Yeah.
And want to see them come to follow Jesus. But more often than not, we have this righteous indignation that we're like, they're just being demonic, falling the way of the world. And how willing are we to step into the fray and try to point them towards Jesus?
Especially in an us versus them mentality. An us versus them mentality is, again, what is Paul to do? It divides. If, it's us versus them. And so as long as Christians can bridge the gap, and that's the quote that I took from you again and back in April is, while America will never truly experience a United States, we are called that, but as much as it's up to us, they should be able to experience a united church.
Right.
And that's where part of handling disagreements and handling conflict and handling how we go about proclaiming Christ-likeness to all is important. And we don't want to get in the way of the gospel message, because what does church division do? It undermines the gospel. Yeah. Because if they can't get along, why do I want to be there?
Right. And so that question is just, I go back to the question originally of who has disappeared from your life because of politics, looking at that first one of people that have walked away because of me. That we have to think through that. We have to face that. Like, who have I intentionally pushed out of my life? Or maybe unintentionally pushed out of my life because I can't control myself. Because I don't have the fruit of the Spirit while claiming to stand for Christian values. Who have I pushed away?
Or even like for social media, for example, it's very easy to do it on social media because it's not a real thing. It's not.
We're not face to face.
We're not face to face, but I'm human. There's some posts I see that I'm like, okay, when it comes to some inerrancies that I see, I'm like, okay, that's like a, there's some things I'm like, I don't really want to see that. Yeah. And so I've unshared those things, and when it comes to things I disagree with. And so I'm guilty of that just like anybody else. But when you curate your own feed all the time with people who agree with you all the time, it's very easy to do that on social media. But there's more at stake when you do that in your personal life. If you're curating the people around you all the time with people who agree with you, everyone be able to get along all the time. Yeah. Great. Yeah. But then you're still, when you're I know with church world, it gets really easy because we work in a church, we live for a church, and we this is what we do for a living. It's very easy for us to get in our holy huddle, but it makes us we have to be very mindful of who we're reaching out to, and we have to be get out of the holy huddle sometimes. It's I still have an influence, whereas it's a lot easier maybe for people who are listening, who have workplaces, who have people who aren't just all Christians, and having to navigate with that, and it's still difficult. Yeah. And you have to tread very carefully. And everyone knows this. That's the thing too. Yeah. Everyone knows, or at least should know, that you have to, we just come with experience of life. Yeah. We have to tread carefully depending on who's in there. Yeah. and just trying to be mindful of those and being, putting others first mentality when it comes to our message we have to say.
Yeah, and I can't state the importance of intentionally have conversations with or put people around you that have a different background than you. Like, I think it's very easy for we'll say right-leaning Christians to pop off about the border. Why don't you sit down with a brother, sister from Mexico? Sit across eyeball to eyeball with them and speak as vehemently as you have been online to them. You ain't gonna do it. Because you can see the impact on a real life.
Yeah.
Thinking about News Story. Are we quick to pop off online about the border? Well, guess what? Guess what our community is? Guess what? We have many people in our church that are Mexican. Are they here legally, illegal? I don't know. But we're very quick to pop off on those things. We have to be really careful. We're very quick to pop off about women in leadership, thinking about like Kamala Harris running for president, or even her being biracial. She's Jamaican and Indian. Very quick to pop off about those things. Now sit down across from a biracial woman. Go ahead and say those same things about them. It's a lot harder to, and that's the point. Sit down and actually see the creativity in God's image right in front of you.
Yeah.
That not everyone looks the same, not everyone has the same existence. And if you do that, I think you'll begin to see the kingdom is so much bigger than the soil I stand on and the borders in which I live. Kingdom's so much bigger and broader than that, and that's where my priority needs to lie.
Yeah.
I've talked about it many times before. We have the moniker of I'm in but not of the world, when really I think our idea and when that's our idea, I'm in but not of the world, it's very easy for us to withdraw from the world. And it's like, let's go into hell in a handbasket, let's let it go. When really I think what the scripture teaches is we are not of the world, but we are sent into the world. And that should completely change our perspective on how we engage with people. That we are God's messengers. Jesus has entrusted his reputation with us. And so what will be said of us after this election? Be said of Christians. Because it was something I loved, Matt Chandler said just a few weeks ago on a series they're doing right now, talking about some politics and things like that. Is that it was a clip that went viral where he got pretty fiery, which not uncommon for Matt Chandler, but that decades ago Republicans co-opted evangelicals to just be another voter base that they can influence, and that should bother us. But we got the elephant in the church was that we got, what's the word I'm looking for? We got so blinded by our thirst for political power and what we can do with it that we just didn't care. And so we see the rise of the moral majority. You can look through history. There's a lot to this, but
we saw that, and we, like how the sausage gets made. Like, this is what it takes. Mm-hmm. If we want God's will to be made known, we got to seek it through political power.
And like you mentioned yesterday, something we've talked about a bunch, is the kingdom is not built from the top down.
Yeah.
Why do you think Jesus came to a poor family in a manger, in a barn, and not a king's palace?
And what all the disciples wanted him to do.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, let's get going. Let's get this political power going.
Yeah. This is Jesus who rode on a donkey, guys. Jesus who was a carpenter's son, who got a bunch of, a ragtag bunch of kids, teenagers, to be his primary people that would then go on to build his church. Does that sound like someone who says, yeah, we need political power to really make this message go forward? No.
And then you even go on to the Acts. Paul uses his political and like civic responsibility, his rights as a Roman citizen and as like a Jew to like use the Romans road, like legitimately the road and to carry the message of the gospel. So he used his engagement of politics, if you would say it that way, like he used his rights as a citizen to further Christ's kingdom. And he took advantage of what he had, and both his culture of being a Jew, but also as a Roman citizen. Like he got to use that for his benefit, to further, not his benefit, for Christ's benefit. And that's part of what we're trying to do with this series, and what we're trying to do with this is just taking a step back. Like, are we conforming to a pattern of this world? Are we conforming to a pattern or a party of this world? Yeah. Or are we being transformed by the renewing of our minds? And I know Tuesday's coming. And likely it's tomorrow. So if we can get this up, you might have already voted if you listen to this, but if you hadn't yet, I think there's some good questions we can ask, as we're going into there. If you wanted to get into that now, I know we spent a lot of time, but I didn't get a good chance. Did you get a look at
why don't you talk us through how you found this, what it is, this book you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And then what I thought would be good is to walk through these bullets here, read through those, because that's kind of the thesis of the whole book.
Yeah, that's why I printed it out. So what ended up happening is there's this book that is by David Platt called Before You Vote. And he had wrote it I believe in response to the 2020 election, much like Andy Stanley wrote Not in It to Win It, or he wrote it in the last couple of years. I can't quite remember, but in my study, and I was trying to think, what are some tangible things we could do to be able to ask people? And originally I was going to okay, before you vote, here's 7 things that you need to think through. And then that's just not the direction I wanted to go in and had the time to go in. But this book is all about 7 questions every Christian should ask of them. Now, it's a lot of things we've already talked about that I think is good questions to be asking, because, again, it's not black and white as we try to make it out to be. And we want you to weigh carefully the issues. And we want you to work through it and to be knowledgeable of what is being at stake when you're voting. Like, this reality, like, we don't just go in there, or shouldn't just go in there and just like check without even knowing the issues. Like, we need to at least know what's going on in the country and what we're voting for and why we're voting for it. And so this book, I just found it just trying to look up some different ways to give resources to people, to be able to hand off, to be like, here's something that could help, inform us a little bit. Because, again, as I said, I'm not a political scientist or a pundit. I had to Google what that word meant because I've heard it so many times. I'm not an expert when it comes to politics. So I was, I tried to read and study and, get a lot of voices. And this is one of the resources I found. It's a free PDF download of an ebook of Before You Vote.
Yeah. And it's got a few kind of general principles through it that he summarizes here that I want to read, because it's based off of several questions that he poses through the book. And those are kind of make up the chapters. And so I want to read through, like, here's the questions and here's kind of the overall principle that gets us to the very last question of the book.
Yeah.
But
the first question is, does God call me to vote?
Yes, and he says, God calls us to steward our vote for the sake of his commands, including his commands to do justice, subject ourselves to and support government, seek the welfare of our nation, and love our neighbors as ourselves. That should sound very familiar.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked very heavily on that.
What's the second question?
Who has my heart?
Yeah, the most important decision we can make is to yield our hearts to Jesus, placing all of our trust, allegiance, big word, and hope in him alone. Not in, and I'm adding this, not in whoever's in the White House, whatever. Placing all our trust, allegiance, and hope in him alone.
Next question is going to be, what does my neighbor need?
The driving force in how we vote is supreme love for God and selfless love for others, both in our nation and throughout the world.
Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
And then the question 4 is actually how I found this book.
Okay.
Is, what is the Christian's position? Because, and why I'm going to caveat here is because that is so hard. When this is the biggest contention for Christians. Yeah. What is the Christian position when it comes to this, when it comes to that, when it comes to this? And that's hard. And And it takes a lot of biblical study. It takes a lot of biblical clarity on those kind of issues.
And wisdom.
And wisdom. That's what I was about to
To
say.
know what to do with what you read.
Yeah, with what you're doing with it. And so anyway, that's question 4. What is the Christian position?
Yeah, we work to know the Christian position on issues that are clear according to God's word in order to form a Christian position on less clear issues that require our wisdom. I think that's a very good way to write that. I'll read it again. We work to know the Christian position on issues that are clear according to God's word in order to form a Christian position on less clear issues that require wisdom. Yeah. I mean, that's self-explanatory. I think that's really good.
Yeah, and then question.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe I'll add. What he's saying is we get kind of the what are the ways of God? What are general principles he's called believers to live by? How he's called us to kind of govern our world, just personally, not saying from an entity like the government, but like for us, how's he called us to engage with our world? And now, because there's certain areas where it's very clear, and in the areas where it's a little bit more gray, we allow those positions, the ways of God, the wisdom of God, to now inform what we do. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that's great. Question 5 is then, how do I weigh the issues? Once I have the Christian position, how do I weigh them?
Before voting, we weigh issues in terms of factors like biblical clarity and practical consequences. Yeah.
Basically how it gets carried out. Like, so once this gets enacted, put into law, whatever it may be, what is the actual implications of then?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Am I eager? Oh, this is question 6 then. Am I eager to maintain unity in the church?
Cool. I hope so. No matter how we vote, we are eager to maintain the unity of the church around Jesus and his word, not around our personal political convictions.
Yeah, is this gospel priority or personal preference?
Mm-hmm. That's good. And so this all leads to, he says, based on our answers to the 6 previous questions, what is the answer to the 7th question?
How do I vote?
So how do I vote? And we can't answer that for you. So I think here's what we'll do. I will put this book. Basically, it's a downloadable PDF, the entire book, because I think Platt knows the importance of something like this, a resource like this. So I'll link to it in the show notes, and you can read the entire book by tomorrow if you want. Actually, don't. It's a lot. But what you can do is you can go down to chapter 7 and find some really helpful wisdom on how to organize some of these things and think, how do I actually vote? It gives you kind of a practical, what's what am I looking for? Something tangible to figure stuff out. And so he's talking about like 8 different issues. I'll organize political issues in the next presidential election into 8 groups: domestic policy issues like education, gun control, criminal justice, economic issues, environmental issues, foreign policy and national security issues, healthcare issues, immigration issues, personal character and morality issues, and social issues. So there's and then he talks through all those things and how to kind of navigate them and how to possibly think about them.
And the reality, it's going to take work.
Yeah.
And that's why we can't tell you how to vote.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work. Just like we can't make you read your Bible, we can't make you pray, we can't make you do all these things, but we can implore you to go do the work for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I know this feels like a very cop out. Like we get to the very end of like, all right, now how do I vote? Well, you got to figure that out for yourself. And just like we have to as well. And we have to vote with that.
I want to read just the conclusion.
All right.
If that's cool. It says, finally, I'd like to leave you with Paul's encouragement to the Romans. In the middle of that contentious environment in which Christians were adamant in their differing convictions. Well, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so I can see it. There we go. Bad eyes. In the middle of that contentious environment, which Christians were adamant in their differing convictions, Paul attempted to comfort them, writing, "For whatever does not proceed from faith is sin." It's a powerful verse that provides a penetrating definition of sin. We sin whenever we do anything that is not the fruit of trust in Jesus. There are so many implications of that last sentence, implications that would take volumes to unpack, but let's apply to the issue of voting. I trust we all want to glorify God with our vote. I'm guessing that at least some of us are afraid we might make the wrong decision. I've struggled with that before, with wondering whether I made the wrong decision. But as I think about that question, I believe Romans 14:23 teaches us that the way of sin on election day is to steward, that the way to sin on election day is to steward your vote apart from your faith in Jesus. And that's the primary thing I want to exhort you not to do. Do not be faithless on that day when you cast your ballot tomorrow. Do not trust in yourself tomorrow. Do not trust in a candidate or a party tomorrow. Do not trust in anyone or anything but Jesus tomorrow. Make the stewardship of your vote the overflow of radical trust in Jesus, his word to you, his spirit in you, his rule over you, and his reign not only in our nation, but over all the nations. When you hold your ballot in your hand, pause and thank Jesus for his loving leadership of your life and his sovereign lordship over this election. Then, as you check that box, offer this simple and sincere prayer. Lord, may your kingdom come.
Chills, dude.
That's good.
That was good.
That's good. It's a really great way to end that book. So if you want a little bit more resource, a little bit more, or want to look more into that, I will link that in the notes below, so you can do that. But I want to end us with, unless you had more you wanted to go into.
Not necessarily.
I want to end us with some scripture from Isaiah, because I believe right now this world doesn't need more Christians with partisan voices. This world needs Christians with prophetic voices. In Isaiah 8, he's speaking on behalf of God. And this is what he says in chapter 8, verse 11. This is what the Lord says to me, with his strong hand upon me, warning me not to follow the ways of this people, speaking about the Israelites. Do not call conspiracy everything that this people calls a conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear, and do not dread it. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread. Listen, just like Platt was saying at the end of his book, some of the greatest sin that we can commit going to the ballot tomorrow is to vote without considering the kingdom and our faith in God as primary. That we vote full of hope and expectation in another person greater than our hope in God. That we vote. Yeah, I don't need to keep going down that line. You guys get it. And what Isaiah warns here to the Israelites, and I think you can look to us. There's a lot of people peddling conspiracies that if you don't vote, you need to vote because if you need to vote for this person, because if you don't, this terrible thing's going to happen. America's going to end. Your rights are going away. Democracy's going away.
And a real one for me, I was told my kids are going to suffer.
There you go. Your kids are going to suffer. There is nothing but fear being peddled. There's a lot of conspiracies being peddled. And Isaiah, on behalf of God, is wanting to remind the Israelites, and I believe by extension remind us, don't call conspiracy everything this people calls a conspiracy. Don't fear what they fear. Do not dread. What you need to fear is our all-powerful God. Not as unscared. We know the how we should approach this, with awe and respect to our God, that he is building his kingdom here, and we are helping build that kingdom. Don't lose sight of that this election season. And remain faithful to let people know and to affirm the image bearers on the other side of whatever political position you have. I'll leave it there. Anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay. Well, church, let's reframe politics this year. May 2024 show us that we've grown and we've learned since 2020. May it, as 2020 showed us who we are and whose we are, my prayer for the church is that 2024 does the same, but it is a whole different story. It shows
new
us that we are
story.
a new story. We are a kingdom people building his kingdom. Thank you for joining us today. This has been the Equip Podcast, equipping you to live out your Christian life as you faithfully love God and love others with truth and grace. Now let's go do it.